It started with one bark at a dusty repair shop door, but what they uncovered in the back room made the entire block stop cold. Who had access, and why was it hidden for so long? All right, full story's coming up, but real quick, tell me in the comments what you'd name your own canine partner and make sure you're subscribed. It was supposed to be a routine patrol. Officer Mark Tanner and his canine partner Ruckus had spent most of the afternoon circling through Oak Ridge's industrial sector, an area made up of tired warehouses, auto shops, and small repair stores tucked into narrow alleys. Quiet zone, low crime, nothing more than dusty air and the buzz of failing neon signs. But Ruckus, 4-year-old German Shepherd, tactical certified, known for never barking unless it counted, had other ideas that day. At 4:42 p.m., Mark turned down Grove Street, planning to loop back to the station. The sun was starting to fall behind the hardware rooftops. He reached for the radio to check in, and Ruckus stood up. From the back seat of the cruiser, his ears perked, his snout lifted, his whole body tensed. Mark glanced in the mirror. "You good, boy?" But Ruckus wasn't blinking. He was staring dead ahead, toward a small mobile repair shop wedged between a shuttered laundromat and an appliance outlet. Its awning read, "Grove Electronics, phones, tablets, fast fix," in faded vinyl lettering, and Ruckus growled, deep, controlled, and steady. Mark slowed the car. The shop looked closed, metal bars drawn halfway over the front glass, lights flickering, but no customers. A Back in 5 sign dangled sideways on the door. Ruckus didn't care. He barked, once, loud, focused, and again. Now standing in the back seat, eyes locked on the repair shop's side entrance, an old steel door, mostly hidden behind stacked boxes and a half-loaded pallet of parts. Mark parked fast. This wasn't normal. Ruckus leapt out the moment the door opened, bypassing the front of the shop entirely. He pulled toward the side, nose low to the ground, tail rigid. Mark followed. All right, easy. But it wasn't easy, because as soon as Ruckus reached the door, he stopped and barked again, twice, then sat. That was the alert. He'd found something, and it wasn't going away. Mark called it in. Standard K9 alert. Nothing dramatic yet. He knocked once on the side door. No answer. He circled to the front. The metal bars rattled slightly, and the window showed a dimly lit shop floor, countertops scattered with devices, 2 chairs, and a busted wall-mount fan. Nobody inside, or so it seemed. Back at the side entrance, Mark noticed something new, scuff marks in the dirt near the frame, like it had been opened recently, several times. Not much foot traffic in this part of town, and the shop's business license had shown barely any appointments in weeks. But the AC was humming, and from the top vent, Mark could hear it. A soft, repeating clicking sound like a fan struggling to stay alive, or something mechanical, not explosive, but active. Dispatch radioed back. Keyholder for the shop wasn't responding. Owner's phone? Powered off? Ruckus was now pacing. His nose stayed low, tail flicking once in warning. Mark didn't wait. He breached the side door and walked straight into a wave of warm, metallic-smelling air. The side hallway didn't match the building's blueprint. Instead of opening into the back office like it was supposed to, it ran 12 feet long, then turned sharply left into what looked like a storage area, no windows, single overhead bulb, and a row of stacked crates. Ruckus stopped at the threshold, then crept in. The room looked hastily rearranged, cords running beneath the walls, devices torn apart on the counters, solder tools scattered, and shelves filled not with phones but blank plastic shells. Dozens of them, shell phones, no circuits, just outer casing. Why would a repair shop need so many blanks? Mark moved toward the workbench. Ruckus circled to the right, then sat again, this time in front of a heavy black duffel bag tucked beneath a table. He barked. Mark opened it. Inside were 4 things: a handheld RFID duplicator, a portable card skimmer, 2 dozen blank employee ID cards, printed but unnamed, and a notebook. Handwritten, marked with city employee codes, badge access instructions, and one strange phrase repeated 4 times: Use back door only. Door alarm bypassed. Don't trigger dog. Mark froze. Dog? He flipped further. There, another note, dated last Friday. New rotation started. Handler with Shepherd. Avoid midday patrols. They had mapped him. And Ruckus. The texts. The timing. Even his patrol route. And now Ruckus was looking at the far wall where a second door, bolted and hidden behind a shelving rack, stood slightly ajar. Mark called for backup before moving in. Tactical arrived 12 minutes later. They opened the second door. Inside was a narrow chamber, more like a vault than a room. Padded walls, no furniture, a folding table with half-shredded paperwork, and a floor safe. Still locked, but beside it a lead-lined case. When they opened it, it wasn't cash or drugs. It was a police tablet, one of the same kind issued to officers for field report entry. But the serial code didn't belong to any current user. It had been cloned, a duplicate used to log into evidence systems for 2 weeks before the breach was discovered, and whoever had planted it had used the shop as a relay point to upload files off the grid. This wasn't a repair shop. It was a camouflage node, and Ruckus had been the only one to sense the crack. The final page in the notebook listed 4 addresses. Each matched a business, laundromat, parcel center, thrift shop, and a city-run recycling station, all closed for minor renovations in the last 30 days, all located within a mile of city-run data centers or public safety hubs, and all connected quietly by service tunnels from old utility work. No one had checked those in years until now, but what Mark didn't know? One of the listed addresses had already been visited the night before. Security footage would later show a man entering the recycling depot after hours. No flashlight, no visible tools, but when he left, he was wearing a city maintenance jacket and holding a delivery crate from Grove Electronics. By the next morning, Grove Electronics was a sealed crime scene. Officer Mark Tanner returned early, reviewing footage from surrounding shops. Nothing unusual on the surface. Pedestrian traffic, delivery vans, the occasional late customer, but one camera mounted above the print shop across the street had captured something telling. At 2:43 a.m., barely 5 hours before Ruckus first barked, a man in a hoodie had slipped around the side of the repair shop, bypassing the front entirely. He moved confidently, no flashlight, no hesitation. In his hand, a white-labeled courier crate marked with the city seal. He didn't knock, he didn't fumble, he keyed in a code and let himself in. The timestamp mattered, because whoever he was, he left through the same side door 15 minutes later, without the crate. Mark and a small unit headed to the first address in the notebook, the old laundromat on Fulton Avenue. It had been closed for nearly 2 weeks with a small city notice pasted to the window, renovation, plumbing repair pending. But when they entered with warrant in hand, they didn't find tools or ripped-up tile. They found routers, 3 of them, linked to signal boosters positioned behind wall panels and wired directly to the building's power. Inside a broom closet, another matching crate, empty, lined with foam. Mark radioed it in. It's not a laundromat, it's a relay station. Each of the other addresses shared something strange: underground access. The thrift shop had an old freight elevator that didn't run. The parcel center had a rear hatch that fed into a defunct postal chute. The recycling depot, listed 4th, sat directly over an abandoned sewage line used for stormwater overflow. But it was the recycling depot that gave them the breakthrough, because when officers reviewed its surveillance logs, footage manually erased but partially recovered, they saw the same man from Grove Electronics, entering late, exiting later. Only this time, he wasn't carrying anything. He was wearing a utility vest, high visibility with the city's waste services logo. It was a disguise, but one detail stood out: a patch sewn above the chest. CMSO. Mark flagged it. No department by that name existed in the city database, but in an old federal compliance notice from 2 years ago, Mark found something buried in an annex. CMSO. City Emergency Management Support Operations. Not a real division, a shell, used by contracted logistics teams to blend into emergency zones. Some had been flagged during the last tri-state disaster drill, but the names disappeared before investigations could begin. Now they were back, and no one had noticed, except Ruckus. At 11:19 a.m., IT officers at the City Network Center confirmed something else. One of the cloned police tablets found inside the shop had quietly logged into a low-tier database the previous week. The access was minor. It only downloaded open shift schedules, badge sign-in logs, and parking credentials. But buried in the logs was a strange anomaly. 2 logins 15 minutes apart from the same badge ID. That's not possible under normal use. It was a duplication designed to see which station computers still accepted outdated encryption protocols. A dry run, and the success rate 80%. Had the clone tablet remained in circulation, it could have gained full access within days, clearing evidence logs, modifying timestamps, even reassigning badge activity to someone who never walked through the door. Mark stared at the report. This wasn't about hacking the system. It was about replacing the source, quietly. One badge, one terminal, one stolen jacket at a time. That night, the team made their next move based on something Ruckus found earlier. The city maintenance jackets stored in the Grove shop, one had a tracer thread embedded in the hem, a passive tech used to monitor inventory location on high-risk fieldware. Only the thread had been clipped short, and it had residue, not from the shop but from a pallet dock. Not recent either. Oil traces, wood dust, and a unique compound used in high-density resin storage. That compound only came from one place in the county, the Red Hollow shipping warehouse, decommissioned last year. At 2:17 a.m., Mark and the tactical team approached the building. Its front was sealed, its side doors welded shut. But Ruckus once again barked, twice hard, and locked in on a vented side panel covered in debris. It popped open with a firm push. Inside, a maze of half-empty pallets, forgotten loading racks, and a glowing panel near the far corner. It hummed faintly, connected by a single wire line to a router. Still powered, Mark moved forward. In the center of the panel was a screen. One button blinked. Phase 3, confirm identity exchange? The words were meaningless until they read the attached log. Active exchanges. Badge ID 1447, assigned to Officer Mark Tanner. Badge ID 1447A. Cloned ID, verified last use 3:04 a.m. His badge had already been copied, and someone had attempted to use it before dawn. Back at the station, Mark sat alone in the K9 bay staring at his gear. Ruckus lay nearby still, but every so often he'd lift his head and look toward the hallway, just like he did before it all started. One more page remained in the notebook recovered from the Grove shop. On it, in uneven handwriting, were 3 sentences. Don't trust the uniforms. They'll log in under your name, but the dog will know. Ruckus looked up again, then growled. Mark stood. Someone had just badged into the front of the station, but the officer who supposedly used it was already on vacation. They had moved again, and it would be the 3rd time today a uniform entered the wrong building. But this time, they weren't walking out. The sound of the electronic badge reader chirped softly. Officer Mark Tanner stepped into the hallway just as the door clicked shut again. Ruckus stood at the edge of the corridor, rigid and silent. Whoever had just walked into the station was wearing the right uniform. They had the right ID, but they were not supposed to exist. Mark moved quietly, watching the station's internal cameras from his tablet. One feed flickered, just one. Camera 7, East Corridor. It had gone offline for 7 seconds, then came back. That hallway only led to 2 things, the locker room and the K9 wing. He turned to Ruckus. The dog didn't need a command. He was already walking. They found the man inside the K9 locker room. He stood by the storage unit, staring into a mirror, one glove off, badge in hand. Mark saw it before the man turned. The patch on his shoulder was wrong, a thread out of place, a detail only someone who had worn the uniform for years would notice. "Don't move," Mark said quietly. The man turned slowly. The face was familiar, but not from the precinct, from a surveillance image. He was the one from the repair shop alley, the courier, the fake janitor, and now standing in uniform, badge Tanner M., his own name, his own ID, used against him. But he didn't fight, didn't argue, he smiled. "You were supposed to ignore the bark," he said, then tossed the badge on the floor. With the imposter arrested and in holding, Mark and the forensic team returned to Grove Electronics. The entire site was being re-examined. Every wall panel, every vent shaft. That's when they found it, a false back panel behind the customer counter. Inside, a crawl space. Tight, narrow, but it led to a hidden room built inside the old foundation. In that room, one chair, a desk, a cable modem, and 5 monitors. Still powered, still online. 4 of them showed camera feeds from public city spots, but the 5th, it showed the inside of a room they recognized, the K9 unit bay. The feed was live. Somehow, someone had been watching for days, possibly weeks, studying the dogs, their behavior, their barks. The system wasn't to break into the department. It was to find out how much the dogs could detect before the humans noticed. And they had built everything around that timing. Inside the hidden room, tucked into a drawer, was a black folder. 1 page, no names, just codes. And next to each one, locations, access levels, and a single word. Replaced badge IDs, officer numbers, some from this precinct, others from surrounding counties. One of them, R. Mantell, the badge used at the federal annex. Another, J. Reddick, the ID used in the failed infiltration at the evidence wing. And below those, 3 more badge numbers, all active, all assigned to real people. Only they'd never logged in from the places these records said they did. Someone was operating through their identities. And the only thing that had stopped them? Ruckus, because none of the logs accounted for K9 proximity. The dogs were interfering with signal sequences in unpredictable ways. Each bark was a red flag, each sniff a delay. And those delays had begun to unravel the entire system. One more piece remained. In a locked metal briefcase recovered from the false room, the tech team found a sequence file, encrypted, archived, but inside a plan, titled Phase Shift Profile Transition Protocol. It mapped out a 12-week operation to quietly replace 5 law enforcement profiles within the city, not just digital identity, but physical uniform swaps, badge duplication, and locker infiltration. It wasn't a takeover, it was a substitution, slow, layered, in progress. And the next name scheduled for replication? Elena Reyes, Ruckus's original handler before she transferred stations months earlier. Mark called her. She hadn't been on duty in 2 weeks, but she had received a visit from someone claiming to be from Internal Affairs, someone who asked about the K9 program. The dogs weren't just disrupting the infiltration, they were the only ones detecting it. And someone was now targeting the handlers too. The final clue was the uniform the imposter wore. When fully examined, the inner lining had a sewn tag, identical to the one found at the Grove shop earlier. But this one had a message stitched inside, not printed, not labeled, hand-stitched. Axe class interference variable. Canine disruption risk, critical. Disable by proximity override or handler separation. They knew which dogs were active threats, and they knew how to suppress them, either isolate the dog or remove the handler. This was the real plan, because the last phase wasn't digital, it was biological, and Ruckus had been a problem from the start. Within 48 hours, an interagency alert was issued. 5 other precincts discovered similar anomalies, stolen jackets, mismatched patchwork, access logs that didn't align, all traced back to 3 core digital devices, all wrapped inside innocent deliveries. It was never about hacking a server. It was about building trust in fake people long enough for real ones to vanish. Only one thing had stopped it, a bark. 2 months later, Ruckus was formally commended. But his record had a new note. Disruption variable acknowledged. Active. Retain with original handler at all times. Mark scratched behind his ears, watching the dog stretch quietly, because Ruckus didn't know he'd taken down a quiet network trying to rewrite the precinct's reality. He only knew which doors were wrong, which boxes weren't safe, which uniforms didn't smell like they belonged, and that one day, at a door that looked like every other door, he had barked, and everything changed. If that bark gave you chills, wait till you hear what happened at the next call. This story may be over, but trust me, what's coming next is even bigger. So hit that like button, subscribe, and drop your canine's name in the comments.